You know, a car crash, a fall, a sudden jolt, these things happen in a split second. But what happens when the biggest injury, the most life-altering one, is completely invisible? Today we're diving into traumatic brain injury, or TBI. It's a condition that affects millions, but it's so often hidden and misunderstood. All right, so here's our plan. We're going to follow this journey right from the start, from that initial moment of impact all the way to the lifelong consequences. We'll look at the injury itself, why it's so hard to diagnose, what recovery looks like, and wow, the staggering personal and financial costs. So, let's begin where it all starts, the moment of impact. It's just a single instant, but it's one that can completely change the course of a person's life and set everything else into motion. You see a scene like this, and you might think it looks pretty straightforward. But what's really happening inside the skull is this incredibly violent and complex event, even from impacts that might not look all that severe from the outside. You have to remember, our brains are unbelievably delicate. I mean, think about this. They have the consistency of Jell-O. Seriously. And all that's protecting it is our skull. So during a sudden impact, that soft brain can just slam against the hard bone, causing bruises, bleeding, and tearing all those tiny, fragile nerve fibers. And that brings us to one of the biggest and, frankly, cruelest challenges with TBI. It's invisible. This is where what a person is experiencing on the inside starts to be completely different from what everyone else sees on the outside. Okay, this right here is where a massive misunderstanding happens all the time. A doctor might call a TBI mild, but that label is only based on what happens at the exact moment of the injury, like if someone was unconscious for only a short time. That word says absolutely nothing about the long-term effects, which, let me tell you, can be anything but mild. And this chart, this really just pulls back the curtain on that mild label. It shows you what happens over time. Just look at the bars 2 years after the injury. You see all these symptoms are still there, still causing major problems. For the person living with it, there is nothing mild about it. And we're not talking about small annoyances here. This is a level of fatigue that just crushes you. A memory so poor it feels like parts of your own mind are missing. And this constant nagging frustration. These are the kinds of things that can totally unravel a person's job, their relationships, even their own sense of who they are. So this leaves everyone, from doctors to the patients themselves, with a huge question. If the symptoms are this bad and they stick around for so long, how do you actually see the damage inside the brain, right? It's the core of the problem. If someone looks totally fine, but their symptoms are things like fatigue or just feeling mentally slower, how can we possibly understand and prove the chaos that's happening inside? How can we map that damage? This comparison just says it all. On the left, you've got a standard MRI. A lot of the time, it comes back looking completely normal, which is so frustrating for someone who knows something is wrong. But look at the right. That's a newer technique called MR elastography. It basically shows us how the brain tissue is getting stressed and strained. It makes the invisible visible. It's a total game changer for getting a real diagnosis. So once you can actually map the damage, the long, hard battle for recovery begins. And it's a journey that's about so much more than healing the physical brain. It's really about healing the entire person. Recovery is a fight on multiple fronts. It's not just about the brain's dysfunction. You also have to deal with the deep psychological trauma of the accident itself. You have to learn new ways to cope with these cognitive changes. And you have to build a support system, because believe me, the family is deeply affected by this too. And because the injury hits from all these different angles, the treatment plan has to match. So you're often looking at a whole toolkit of approaches. Things like cognitive behavioral therapy to help rewire those negative thought patterns, maybe medication to help manage mood, and even family therapy to help everyone navigate this new reality together. Okay, so as if all that wasn't enough, now we get to another massive challenge. How do you take this invisible injury and actually prove its impact in a court of law? This quote from legal training material just hits the nail on the head. Because the injury is invisible and the symptoms are what they call subjective, the burden of proof is incredibly high. Patients and their families face a huge uphill battle. So building a legal case for this requires a really specific strategy. A patient's regular doctor is focused on treating them, right? Not on testifying in a courtroom. That's why these cases often bring in what's called a meta-expert. This person is basically a medical storyteller who can take all the different pieces of evidence and weave them together into a clear, powerful story for a jury. And beyond the physical, beyond the emotional toll, there is a financial reckoning. I mean, when an injury causes symptoms that last a lifetime, it also creates a lifetime of medical bills that someone has to plan for. This is where something called a life care plan becomes absolutely essential. You can think of it as a detailed roadmap for a person's future care. It maps out every single treatment, medication, and therapy they're going to need to manage their condition and have the best quality of life possible. Now, just take a look at this table. This breaks down the estimated costs for just 1 year. And look at the details. Nerve blocks for chronic headaches, that's over $11,000. Specialized injections, over $8,000. It adds up so fast. We're talking more than $26,000 for just a single year of care. So what happens when you take those annual costs and you project them out over this patient's expected lifetime? In this case, 48 more years. You get this number, over $1.2 million. It's just a staggering figure that represents a lifetime of necessary medical attention. And that's really the final thought, isn't it? We can calculate the financial cost down to the dollar, but that number can never, ever capture the true human cost, the daily struggles, the lost potential, the incredible strain on families, and the lonely, exhausting battle of living with an injury that the rest of the world just can't see.